Greetings, fifth graders. This is our next unit in science, Unit 5, and it's energy for humans and other living things. And we're going to start talking about what animals and living things need to get for food and oxygen. And you can see this little picture of this little guy. He's stuffing his little chipmunk cheeks full of peanuts to get some food. And you can see the breath of the horse on this cold winter day, and it's kind of hard to catch a picture of an animal breathing, so this is just a little representation. You can see the steam coming out with its breath. So animals breathe in different ways, and if you've ever tried to hold your breath, you quickly find out that you have to breathe. Do you ever wonder exactly why you need to breathe in oxygen? Well, believe it or not, it's just very much related to the food that you eat. Food provides your body with the energy that it needs, but if your body does not get the oxygen it needs, it cannot use that energy. Oxygen is needed by all animals to break down food molecules and release energy that's found in food. So we're going to take a look at some animals that use lungs to breathe here. These little baby sea turtles. Maybe. There we go. It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. And as you're watching this, you should be able to see them take a big gulp of air. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is. It's a big one. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like not a big breath. What you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Give me all you got, don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because some other animals also breathe through tiny holes that they have in their bodies. And so this is a praying mantis, and you're going to see it if you'll keep your eyes kind of on these little, they look like spots. These are actually the holes. And there's one kind of here and one over here that the praying mantis takes in the air through. So here we go. There it goes. Whoop. So there they are. It's going to close up here for you. So you can see its body actually doing the thing, but these are the little holes that they get the air through. Pretty amazing stuff, isn't it? Another way that animals breathe is through gills. Fish are considered animals, and they do have gills, so they can breathe underwater. You can see the fish tank here, and we'll look down into the fish tank, and you'll see a guy down here breathing. There he goes. And the fish, when they breathe in the water, the gills actually are what filter out the oxygen so that their bodies can get their oxygen. Finally, we have some animals that actually breathe through their skin. These lungless salamanders breathe through their skin. So that means that anything that's in the water gets absorbed through their skin, including things that they shouldn't get into their skin, like pollutants. So the animals breathe through lungs, through holes in their skin, through gills, and through their skin. So now we're going to take a look at how do animals get the energy that they need. But first we have to stop and take a look at plants as well. One of the characteristics that all living things is that they obtain, which means they get, and use energy. So for plants, that means they capture that energy from the sun and use it to produce food. The process is called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. And it actually occurs here in the leaves of the plants. So food that's not used by the plant for its own life activities gets stored in different parts of the plant. And because they produce their own food, plants are called producers. Animals, however, do not produce their own food. They must consume it by eating plants or by eating animals that eat plants. For this reason, they are called consumers. And this little guy is definitely consuming something almost as big as he is. So we're going to take a little look at producers, consumers, and decomposers here as we go through our science unit. So some animals that eat plants and obtain the energy that's stored in their plant, and animals that eat only plants are called herbivores. And that's actually spelled kind of strangely. It's spelled Herbivores. And they may graze and nibble plant material. Other animals get their energy by eating the plant eaters. If an animal eats only, that's right, only other animals, it's called a carnivore. Animals that eat both plants and animals are called omnivores. And then some animals, such as that are called scavengers, they get their food from dead organisms. So if you see a vulture, they are called a scavenger, and they're kind of underneath the category of an omnivore. Food chains and food webs are good ways to show how animals get the energy that they need. A food chain shows how energy is passed from one organism to another, and a food web can show several different connected food chains. So we're going to take a look here at food chains and food webs. So some animals that are eating all those things, it's a nice way to be able to show how they're connected together. So let's take a look at this short little video here on food chains and food webs.
Today, we will learn about the food chain. Most of us enjoy eating our favorite food, whether it's pizza, a crisp apple, yummy roasted chicken, a crunchy bite of Chocos, or any other food item. Eating is not just for the deliciousness it brings. Actually, we need energy for whatever we do, from playing a favorite sport to studying for a science test, or roaming around with your friends. The same thing is applicable to every living organism on Earth. These cute rabbits, tiny beetle, naughty squirrel, beautiful fish, lovely flowers, and these trees. If it's alive, it needs energy. Ah, where does this energy come from, and how does it get passed around to all living things? Energy passes from one organism to another as they eat plants or any other one. This flow of energy from one living thing to another living thing is called a food web or a food chain. We humans get our food from animals and plants. Plants make their own food. They use carbon dioxide from air, sunlight, and water from soil to make their food. This process is known as photosynthesis. So, now you're clear that plants make their food. We humans and other living organisms depend on plants for food. Now, look closely. A deer is coming. Oh, it's eating the plant. Species that eat only plants and herbs are called herbivores. Oh my gosh, a lion is coming in and it's in an attacking mood. Lions and other species that eat other animals are called carnivores. Just now, you have seen a small food chain. Plants make their own food. Other animals eat plants, and they are eaten by other animals. You can say directly or indirectly, we all depend on plants for food. This food chain began with plants. Plants are the producers because they produce food. The species that eat plants are known as primary consumers, and the species that eat the species that is dependent on plants directly is called secondary consumers. Now you see a not so noticeable part of this food chain. These are bacteria and fungi in soil. When animals die, these bacteria and fungi decompose their dead bodies. They become nutrients, and these nutrients are again used by the plants to make food. These bacteria and fungi are called decomposers. They are also a very important part of a food chain. Now, look at this food chain. The grasshoppers eat grass, and they are eaten by the frog. The snake eats the frog, and the hawk eats the snake. The hawk dies and is decomposed by the bacteria and fungi, and becomes nutrients that is used by the grass. The food chains that we see, which has one producer, one primary consumer, and one secondary consumer, and decomposers, is called a simple food chain. A food chain is a simple version of what actually happens in nature. But everything is not so simple. This looks complex. In this chart, grass can be eaten by both rabbit and grasshopper, and this mouse can be eaten by both the snake and the kookaburras. Also, this snake can be eaten by the eagle and kookaburras. So a food web is a network of food chains by which nutrients and energy are passed on from one species of living organisms to another species. Now you know about food chains and food webs. Can you show the diagram to your friends? Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos.
So let's review that. A food chain shows how energy is passed from one organism to another in an ecosystem. And the word eco, or the word part, actually means of or relating to the environment. And system is a set of connected things that work together for a particular purpose. So that's how come we call it an ecosystem. So let's take a look at another example of a food chain. So starting with the sun, pretty much all food chains start with the sun. There's a producer, the grass. The primary consumer, the first one to eat anything, that means, is a grasshopper. Secondary consumer is the frog, which means he's the second thing to eat something. The snake is what we call a tertiary consumer. Tertiary means 3. So he's the third one in line. The hawk is the final consumer in this food chain because he eats the snake. And then when the hawk finally dies, his body would decompose and become food and energy for the fungi, when the bacteria that are present in the soil that decompose the bodies of dead things. And so they are called decomposers as well. So that final consumer provides the energy for those living things. And that's why we call this a food chain. Now this food web is model that shows many different feeding relationships among the living things. And if we take a look here, the sun is, of course, the driving force for all of the living things in this food web because it gives energy directly to the vegetation or the plants down here. And what happens is you have a couple of different things that eat the vegetation or the plants. We have deer, we have rabbits, we have mice, and there are some insects that eat certain kinds of vegetation. But let's take a look at going back to the deer. After the deer eats it, really the only animal that's going to eat a deer, and this is a cougar, right? But the rabbit has a couple of different animals that might eat it, the cougar, as well as the fox. So there's two different arrows right there. The mouse, you can see, can be eaten by three different things: snakes, foxes, and cougars. Although I don't imagine these guys mess with them too much, but if they're hungry. The insect could also be eaten by the mouse, the frog, and sometimes even the snake. So then if we look, the frog could also then be eaten by the fox, maybe even by the snake. Snakes might be eaten by foxes. That's why that energy goes to that. And the cougar could also eat the fox. So in this particular food web, there's quite a bit going on, but if you'll notice, the arrows in the food web always represent where the energy goes to. So it goes to the deer, which then goes to the cougar. It goes from the plants to the rabbits, which then might go to the cougar or to the fox. So you can kind of see how that arrow really represents where does the energy go. All right. And that's going to be the end of our video for today. So you may stop the video and make sure that you log out when you are done.